In part 3 the radio was working very well. I've now got to do the speaker and then I can start restoring the cabinet and we'll put it all back together and see how it looks. I'd actually forgotten about the speaker, but that needs to be attended to as well. So it's electrodynamic. If you recall, we saw the original inspection certificate from the 8th of the 5th 1931, or if you're American it'll be the 5th of the 8th, and it's in really good condition. It's very rusty up here, but generally it's pretty good. The cord's in good condition too. This plug, it appears, I don't know if that's wood or what it is, but it just glues in, so that's come out. I don't know how you're supposed to get it apart if it's glued together, but anyway, so I'll re-glue it, I guess. So the construction is a little different to what we're used to, but it's typical for that time. And it's got a leather, I think it's leather, suspension, and that'll be bolted in around the sides there. Now this leather's gone fairly hard, so I might try and soften that up if it is leather. So if it's possible, I'm going to take out that cone and then I might be able to sandblast the whole thing. Now the jolly great bolt on the top here, if I undo that, does it just take this cover off? It seems oversized for that cover. So I'm a bit cautious about doing that. I'll think about that. I may not need to take it off, I suppose. So I'll start by taking it off the board. So the nuts are coming off. So Alright, there's a leather support or suspension if you want to call it, and there's just screws and nuts on the back, so pretty easy. I'll just unsolder everything first. Let's take this ring off, should be pretty easy. This is the last screw to come out, so now I should be able to just undo the screw and the whole cone will come out. This speaker is in such good condition, it's amazing. Just having a look, there's just 4 bolts holding that whole assembly on by the look of it. I think I could undo those 4 bolts, or screws, and that whole back would come off. I think if I undo the nut at the back I'm going to upset some adjustments, and I don't want to do that. Question is, will they come off? Big screws, I might have to get a bigger driver than this. Whoa, they are tight. Okay, just looking at this, this is not leather. It's got like a woven fabric embedded in it, so it's some sort of resiny coated fabric or something. I don't know. It's like almost like a leatherette or something. I was going to try and soften it up again, but I don't think it's supposed to. I think it's supposed to be quite rigid. Well, I took this out to my workshop and undid the screws, and it's pretty much as I thought. There was no adjustment, it just goes straight on. The holes weren't enlarged or anything, so I knew that it was just going to bolt straight on. So I don't think I'll pull that apart. I'm not going to take that off. I don't know what's under there. I don't need to. I'll put that in the media blaster and get all this paint and refinish it, and yeah, it should come up pretty good. Well, I removed all the rust and cleaned it up and gave it a coat of paint, so the basket and the magnet have come up pretty good. I cleaned all the hardware and phosphoric acid, and they've come up like new, so they're good. I also did a bit of work on the cone. There was some minor cracking in where the joins are there in the paper, so I've cemented that up, and I gave it a quick coat of black paint, make it look pretty. Shouldn't affect it. The construction of the speaker is different to what I'm used to, but when I looked at it properly, it's not much different. There's the voice coil sitting there. It has a big spring in the center, quite light spring, and that's screwed to the magnet, so it just moves up and down as per a normal speaker, but there's no spider there to keep the dust and dirt out, so it's pretty much open to the environment. Having said that, there wasn't much in there. It was pretty clean in there actually. So before I mount the cone back in, here's the air gap where the voice coil sits, and it had bits of metal in there, just very fine splinters of metal. So I used a strong magnet and just ran around there, and that pulled out most of them. Here I've got a piece of very thin plastic. It's off a carton that you put strawberries or something you might get at the markets. And I've just wrapped a bit of masking tape on there with the sticky side out. So that's quite a big voice coil. I can get in there, so I can just run around in there, and any debris will stick to the masking tape. Now modern speakers, you won't get this much masking tape in there. You might get a little bit in there, but generally it picks it up pretty well. So that's nice and clean in there now. So I've got the basket mounted vertically so that there's no sideways pressure on the cone when I try and assemble this. So the wires go there. That should line up there somewhere. Oops. There you go. What I'll do is I'll put all the little screws in. I'll just drop them down to keep the cone where it should be. All the bolts are in. I don't know if I need to centre it or not. There's quite a big air gap, and maybe it just all falls together, but I've got these little plastic strips that I've cut out of berry packet containers that you get in the shops, and I'll just put them in there just because I can, more than because I probably need to. Alright, so they're in. I'll just put the screw in the centre. Alright, that's very tight. So if I pull those out, I think I'm right to go, because that voice coil's not moving even if I put the cone together. So it doesn't appear to be rubbing, so I'll put all the nuts on. The screws and nuts are all in. I'm just going to go around and nip them up. I don't think they need to be tight at all. Now I'm going to do it in a crisscross pattern, as you always do with a circular type construction. So I'll just tighten them up slowly and just very gradually bring them up to the tension I need. Okay, I'm happy with that. They're just done up snug. I just held onto the socket. I didn't try and wrench them up, and I think that's plenty. I don't want to deform it, so that part's finished, and I think it's okay. Yeah, I can't hear any sound of it scraping, so we should be good. Just a case now of connecting the wires up, and we're done. Now these two wires coming out from the field coil are damaged, and I assume it's where they've bent around the corner for all those years and been bolted to the side here. So I'm going to put some heat shrink on it, and that should hold it, I hope. There we go. So I'll just cut that one off a bit. It's too long. Now it had a little, like a wooden grommet in there before. It was just a turned up bit of wood that used to fit in. Now I managed to lose that. I wasn't too worried about it. Now this material here is so thick, this is not going to make it, but I might be able to just get it to stay there, I reckon. I've got to say, that's worked better than I thought. Alright, that's great. Okay. So I put the cable back on, so that fits there somewhere. That goes around to the field coil, and there's a clamp. Just a matter now of soldering everything back together. I'm just trying to solder these old wires, and I'm having a bit of trouble. They've corroded up the wire as is normal, so I'm going to use an old trick to try and clean them off. Now I've just got a vinegar and salt solution there, and I'll just dip them in there for a little minute. Well, that's been about, I don't know, a minute I suppose, and they've come up quite clean. That's good. Now to neutralise the acid, I've just got some bicarbonate of soda here. I don't know if you can't see that it's bubbling as it's neutralising the acid. So It's called bicarb soda here. I think the Americans call it baking soda. So there you go. So they look a lot better. Good. So I'll just do the other two and we'll see if they'll join together. Well, I've done the other wires. I'll just see if it'll take solder now. Yep, sure does. That's great. Okay. So I'll do the other ones. So the wire's cleaned up pretty good and soldered together well. So I've just put them in, I've tinned them and I've just put them in a quib connector there. See if that'll work. So I can see the solder running up the wire there, so I'm happy that that's got a good connection there. So I'll do the other one and then we'll just shrink these both together. This clamp's not as tight as it could be, so I'm just going to take the clamp off, bend it, and then we'll plug it into the radio and see if the speaker works. Well, there it is, it's all done. I've mounted it on the backboard and ready for a test. So the radio's warmed up, we'll see if it's got anything there.
Meet with your mum. Except you're unlikely to find her at the usual tourist haunts. Martha Cooper is her name, and she has been documenting street graffiti culture since the 1970s. Those amazing photos of New York trains from the 70s.
Friday night. Home ground for live sport. Live sport. Macquarie Sports Radio.
Hi, Steve Karen Loyes. He's with us from the beginning.
It was a global phenomenon.
Marty has her own unique perspective on things. It wasn't always easy for her to get the attention that she deserved.
That sounds pretty good to me. Now it'll sound much better in the cabinet, of course, but there's no scraping in the voice coil, and so unfortunately the next step is the cabinet, and I'm not looking forward to that. But anyway, I'll get out there and get started on that. Well, it's time to have a go at this cabinet, I suppose. So first off, I'll just get this escutcheon or bevel, whatever you call it, off. So this is just a stamped brass bezel. I've seen people polish these up to brass and I don't like it, so I'm going to keep it similar to that. They might be able to shine it or something, put something on it to shine it up. But I don't want to bring it back to brass. I don't like that. Now the cabinet itself's in really good condition. I'll just save this little warranty, I think it's a warranty, patent notice. Yeah, it's a license notice, whatever that means. Now the case is in great nick and it's very solid. There's nothing loose, everything's tight, all the joints are good. So that's pretty amazing. At 90 years old. And it's holding well. I'm just going to try and determine what the finish was originally. Now I've got some methylated spirits on a rag. I think it's called alcohol in other countries. If that starts melting it, then we know it's a shellac, which I don't think it is. So yeah, that's not coming off. Comes up nice, but it's not coming off. Now there are preparations you can get that would, you can just apply it. It sort of reactivates it a little bit. I don't really know how they work, but it'll would have brought it back. But it's got a few dings in it and scratches and marks, so that's not going to work. The surface needs to be good nick to do that. So I'm going to have to paint strip it and refinish it. Now, this is a special varnish stripper, so it's a bit more gentle than some of the others. Paint strippers, but it takes the varnish off pretty quick. In fact, it's coming off as I'm brushing it on. It's bubbling up. So I just need to let that sit for 5 minutes or so and I'll scrape it off. I've got plastic scrapers I'll use to do that. That's been 5 minutes to just see how it comes off. That looks pretty good actually. It's coming out very well. So just wiping the stripper off with a damp cloth The stripper won't have removed all the old finish. There'll still be bits there, but I'll wait till it dries, then I'll be able to see where they are and just locally treat them. I might just be able to sand it off. I'll have to see how it comes up. So I'll just spin the radio over. I'll do the other side and the front and the top, and I'll get back to you and give you an update as I go along. Well, there it is, all stripped off and almost ready to refinish. There's the starburst pattern on the front still. Yeah, so it came up okay. It's a really nice cabinet, really well made. I've gone around and cleaned up a lot of the dings in it. There's still one there. I've put some filler in that. I'm not the best cabinet maker in the world by a long shot, but when I use a filler, I use it darker than what it needs to be, because when it dries, it'll lighten out. If I was to use a colour that matched that now, which is probably something like walnut, it would come out almost yellow by the time it dries. So I've got a darker one, and I found the darker one hides better. It looks more natural than the lighter ones. So I just need to sand that off. So that's concealed quite well. And even now, it's still too light. I don't understand it. Anyway, so after I paint stripped this, I just went around and sanded off the rest of the paint strip. I got most of it off. But I spent an entire afternoon just sanding off bits and trying to repair bits. And there's still stuff I need to go and do before I try and refinish it. Now, from what I can tell, this top bit up here, which is fairly normal, the edges were done in black paint. So is the base. So that was black, and there's still plenty of signs of the black paint that was in there. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to mask it up, and I'm going to paint it with gloss black, and it looks really good. People will probably yell at me for doing that, but this is a veneered top, so it's made up of sections, so they usually paint it black so you can't see the edges of it. I've cleaned out the back a bit as well. I need to do a bit more work on that, so I'll also refinish in there, and I've got a varnish and stain in one in walnut, which I'll just rub over, I think, with a cloth, and that just brings it right up again. I'll start masking off for the black paint on the top. Just trying to walk this tape around the corner. Not very successfully, I'm afraid. It's not so bad. No, it's not too bad. Let's try and do the same thing here. That's not too bad. I've just laid the cabinet on its back. I need to get tape in here very accurate because it's up against the veneer. I've blown off the area with a compressed air to get rid of any dust that's lying around. I'm just going over with a tack cloth just to remove any dirt that may be sitting on the timber, any dust. I think we're ready to go. Straight away I can see there's cracks in the timber that are going to show up, so I'm going to have to fix those. They didn't show up before, but I think they're not going to cover. So I'm going to wipe that paint off and repair the cracks. Now it appears what they've done is they've used strips of timber along here and then a big one on the front there to give the good front on it. So these are just laid along, joined together, and then a veneer on the top, a bit of ply and some veneer. Just feeling it feels smooth. I don't know that there's any sort of gap there actually. It's probably been filled previously. But what I'll do is I'll just give it a coat of undercoat, I think, and then sand it back and just make sure that it does cover before I hit it with the black again. And it's the same on the other side when I look really carefully. But yeah, I couldn't see those till the black hit it and showed it up. I'll do that now. I've just filled those up with a bit of putty, but it's still missing bits. I've got a high fill spray primer, so I just hit them with those, and that might be enough. So I'll give that a couple of coats of that, and we'll see if it fills it up. I can see the cracks coming back in these ones, so I might have to start filling them again. I filled all the cracks up, and hopefully everything is okay. I'm going to give it another quick spray of black and just see how it reacts. That looks pretty good. So I'll keep going. Just doing the bottom as well. There it is, all done. I will wait another hour or so and I can give it another coat, and may give it a coat after that as well. See how it comes up. You can see the undercoat under it, which is a nuisance. It's just got the undercoat. I've taken the black paint off, getting the tape off, I think. Now what I should have done is cut around with a knife first before I took the tape off. I meant to do that and I just totally forgot to do it. Anyway, I can fix that, and that'll be fine. So I fixed all that damage that was around there. I actually remasked it and just sprayed it, and then took the tape off before the paint dried fully. So that's come up quite nice. So before I can put the top finish on, this was also blacked out in here. Once again, it's a plywood, and it's just got a thin veneer over the top. So they blacked that out so you can't see the layers. Now I've done this before. I can't remember how I did it. So I think I'll lie the cabinet on its back and just put masking tape on it and cut around. I can't see any other way of doing it neatly. Well, I'll just have to start putting tape on. I'll see how hard it is. If it's too hard, I'll think of something else. Well, there it is, all ready to go. I'm just going to give it a quick spray of a light undercoat to just to try and fill up any dags that are in there, and then I'll give it a coat of black. So I'll just let that dry for an hour or so and come back. So I've just been sanding the inside of the fretwork here to smooth it out, smooth the undercoat off. I've just been paying particular attention to the edge here so that the grey line doesn't appear under the black when you take the tape off. Alright, let's give it a bit of black. So once again I'll let that dry, and I think I'll probably give it one more coat at least. I'll give them that 2 coats of paint, and I'll just take the tape off and see how we go. That's come up very well. I'm going to leave it overnight and let the paint harden completely, and then I'll be able to sand off the edges here and touch up any little white bits of undercoat or something that you can see or just haven't quite covered properly. Then we'll be ready to do the finishing coat to the rest of the cabinet. Time to paint the cabinet now, and I've got a clear lacquer to paint it with. I'm going to spray it with my spray gun. So I've prepared the cabinet. It's all sanded down and masked off, ready to go. I've wiped it down with a tack cloth to get rid of any dust. I also ran some very fine wire wool over the black to dull it off and smooth it off a bit. There's one of the legs that I've already sprayed just to see how it'll come up, and I think that'll come up really nice. So I put a bit of brown stain on these legs because they were just mouldy colour. They were whites and blacks all over it, so I thought I'll even it out with a bit of brown. I've also added a bit of brown stain to this moulding to darken that up a bit to match the legs, so we'll see how that comes out. I can't spray with the camera on, the camera will get covered in spray, so I'm going to take the camera outside and I'll give it a coat, and we'll see how it's going. I've put a couple of coats on and it's coming up pretty good. I'm just going to rub it back with some very fine sandpaper just to get it back smooth, and then I'll give it another couple of coats. and I think that'll be right. I think it'll come out pretty good. There it is. It's got the last coat of the lacquer on the top, so I think it's come up really well. So I'm very happy with that. So yeah, it's got a nice sheen on it. It's about 60% gloss, so it's perfect. One of the last things I need to do to the cabinet is just clean up the inside to make it look like new again, or close to it. I'm going to use a stain and varnish in walnut, and I'll just wipe that on, probably brush it on, wipe it off, just to coat it and give it a bit of a sheen, and just get rid of that dusty look. Let's see how it goes. I'll just brush it on and see what it does. Well, that looks pretty good. Just wiping it off makes it look a bit better, I think, so I will do that. It's a satin finish, so it'll come up nice and flat when it's finished, and shouldn't stick out too much, so I don't want it standing out more than it should. Now the wife's made me a cup of coffee. I'll just sit here and put the radio on and just do this for a couple of hours. Well, I think the cabinet's pretty much finished. It's come up nice. I initially used a bit of brown stain on the legs. I was going to colour the flutes, but ended up with the stain on everything, so I thought it looked good. They looked terrific, actually, but they didn't match the rest of the set. So I agonised over it for a while, and I asked my wife for her impression, but she said she doesn't do impressions. So in the end I ended up stripping the legs off again and finishing them without the stains. It matches much better now. Now the next item on the list is to fit the grille. It originally was just glued in the back. I'm not going to do that because it's just too hard to try and glue something that way and keep it square. So what I did was make up a backboard and cut a hole in it, and I will use that to mount it. There's a recess in there where the grill went, so it'll work quite well. So all I need to do is just fit it into the recess there, and when the speaker goes over the top, it'll hold it on quite secure. It's about flush with that, so that'll be all right. I could just refit the escutcheon. There you go. Now I managed to get a couple of the escutcheons that go on here, and these things are like hen's teeth, but I got it off a member of one of the radio clubs. I can't put them on. I've ordered some little tiny screws to go in there. They're 0 gauge, so they're very small. So they should come today or tomorrow. I'm just going to refit the little patent and license tag that was on there, if I can. Yep. All right, let's get the speaker in. And after about 2 months, the chassis can go back in. It's all sitting a bit low. I'm going to have to just put some packing under the front to just lift it up to the centre there. I was able to adjust the little carriage these switches are on. I put some packing underneath to lift the whole chassis up. The board it sits on is sagged, and now they're all pretty much dead in the centre, so that's pretty good. So I'm just going to fit all the nuts and do them up, and the chassis is mounted. Got all the knobs on. The only thing is these escutcheons, and I'm waiting for the screws. But I've just heard the postie and went outside, and here they are. So the timing couldn't have been better. There's the little screws. They're O gauge, and let's see if they fit. Yep, perfect. Cool, I'll put them on. Alright, it's pretty much done. I'll turn it on, we'll see if it works.
So there are 4,000 left. Is that how it...
That I shared, how long ago were those statistics? You're probably a little unsure.
I'm very unsure because
It's a rough rule of thumb.
I haven't got an aerial on, it's only just a bit of wire hanging out the door, and we're in a very poor area for reception.
all
So.
of a sudden you have 1,000. And the racing now comes about
Taken away, Donna Jager won the break over Angus Road. Carson Bales between them, oh, they're very tight. Got the miracle run through.
Feel accepted, I feel respected, and also the movie explores his
Feel relief at being heard, but also discover they need to be much more mindful and careful of themselves, and that they need to continually focus there so that they can be healthy. And in teaching people their skills to help them better engage with the emotions and to help them manage their...
There you go. Well done. It works. Looks good. Very happy with that. Well, it's all finished and looking really good. Looks terrific in the room here. It's so elegant, and you wouldn't think so for this style. I haven't had a radio like this before, but yeah, gee, it looks good. It must have been quite a prize back in the 30s. I can't imagine its history. It's been sitting around for a while, I would suggest, and I can't imagine the last time it worked. Now, whether it's gradually deteriorated while it sat around, I don't know, but it had 3 transformers that weren't working. The switches were corroded heavily and had no hope of working. But I was able to get the transformers rewound, thanks Dave. Repaired the switches and replated the chassis, which was a mammoth job taking all those parts out and putting them back again, which was quite unnerving because I really didn't think I was going to be able to reassemble it and make it work. So they came out well. Of course, all those old capacitors packed in wax, we managed to replace all those. They came out well too. And a special thanks to Stuart. He's always available. He'll just answer my questions or little queries that I have or uncertainties, and he's been terrific, and I really appreciate that. Thanks, Stuart. I hope you enjoyed this mini-series, and hopefully the next one won't be quite so long. Thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you on my next radio adventure.
Ask a scientist, it's quantum physics, we are all